Imagine you are standing before a mirror. Not just any mirror, but one forged in the quietest hours of the night, polished not with glass, but with your own unspoken fears. In its reflection, you see your face, the familiar landscape of your identity, the eyes you know, the lines etched by laughter and worry, the mask you present to the world. But if you hold your gaze a moment longer, just beyond the edge of comfort, something else begins to stir. The light shifts, and for a fraction of a second, the face staring back at you is not entirely your own. What was that? A trick of the light or a glimpse into the abyss we all carry within us? We spend our lives curating the self we want to be, sculpting a persona of kindness, intelligence, and control. We are the heroes of our own stories, the righteous protagonists navigating a world of external challenges. We build walls around this carefully constructed identity, fortifying it with moral codes, social affirmations, and the reassuring belief that we are, fundamentally, good. Yet, we are haunted by the inexplicable urge to say the one thing that would shatter a relationship by the sudden. This is the great, unspoken paradox of the human condition. We are both the architect and the saboteur, the lover and the destroyer, the saint and the sinner, all housed within a single vessel of flesh and bone. We declare our values to the heavens, while a subterranean force within us plots to undermine them at every turn. We champion compassion, yet harbor a secret, judgmental critic who dissects the faults of everyone we meet. We strive for discipline, yet find ourselves locked in a losing battle with temptations we pretend not to understand. Why is it that the very things we condemn in others are often the things we refuse to see in ourselves? Why do our noblest intentions so often crumble into dust, undone by an internal enemy we cannot name and dare not face? We have been taught to fight this darkness, to suppress it, to medicate it, to pray it away. We treat it as an alien invader, a glitch in the system, a moral failing to be corrected. Society, from its pulpits to its self-help gurus, offers 1,000 strategies for its annihilation. Think positive, they say. Be your best self. Conquer your demons. But what if this approach, this lifelong war against our own nature, is the very thing that gives the darkness its power? What if our relentless effort to be pure, to be perfect, is the very act that starves one part of our soul and overfeeds another, creating a monster from neglect? That question, who are you, is not new. It has echoed in the stone corridors of ancient monasteries, been scrawled in the desperate final pages of a poet's journal, and been debated by philosophers under candlelight for centuries. The stranger in the mirror has a name, a technical designation given by the great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. He called it the shadow. It is the repository of your other self, the unconscious personality that the conscious ego does not recognize. It is everything you have refused to be. It is not, as many mistakenly believe, simply a bucket of evil. To think so is to miss the terrifying and beautiful subtlety of its nature. The shadow is the home of your repressed instincts, your shamed desires, your unacceptable emotions, your selfishness, your laziness, your rage, your cowardice. But it is also the home of your unlived potential, your dormant creativity, your raw assertiveness, your untamed passion, your profoundest instincts. It is the wild, untamed forest that borders the manicured garden of your conscious self. The creation of this shadow begins in the cradle. As a child, you are a being of pure, unfiltered impulse. You want what you want. You feel what you feel. But you quickly learn that the world operates on a system of conditional acceptance. When you express anger, a parent scolds you. Nice children don't get angry. When you exhibit selfishness, a teacher shaughs you. You need to learn to share. When you are too loud, too emotional, too inquisitive, you are told to be quiet, be reasonable, be still. Love, approval, and safety become transactional. To receive them, you learn to amputate the parts of yourself that are deemed unacceptable. You take your natural aggression, your healthy selfishness, your righteous anger, and you lock them away in the cellar of your psyche, hoping they will disappear. But they do not disappear. They coalesce in the dark, feeding on neglect, growing stronger, more primitive, and more desperate for release. You spend the rest of your life pretending that cellar doesn't exist, even as you hear the floorboards creak above it. This process is not a flaw in your upbringing. It is a fundamental mechanism of civilization. Society itself is built upon the collective repression of the shadow. As the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche warned, when you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. He understood that our moral codes, our tidy definitions of good and evil, are often a desperate attempt to impose order on the chaotic, instinctual truth of human nature. We create a good self, a persona, that can function within society, but the cost is immense. We create an internal tension, a psychological wound that never heals. The Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky masterfully dissected this wound in his characters. He showed us men like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, who intellectually justifies a monstrous act, believing himself to be extraordinary, only to be psychologically devoured from the inside out by the guilt and paranoia that his shadow unleashes. The primary weapon the shadow uses in this war is projection, because you cannot bear to see the greed, the arrogance, or the cruelty within yourself. Your mind performs a brilliant, insidious trick. It casts those traits onto the people around you. Suddenly, it is not you who is envious. It is your colleague whose ambition is infuriatingly naked. It is not you who's judgmental. It is that relative whose self-righteousness is unbearable. It is not you who harbors a secret capacity for betrayal. It is your political opponents who are clearly treacherous and evil. The shadow allows you to feel a sense of moral superiority while indulging in the very emotions you condemn, just at a safe distance. You get the satisfying charge of righteous indignation without the painful cost of self-awareness. This is why the world is so full of crusaders fighting monsters, so many of whom fail to see the monster's reflection in their own shield. This is the great hidden problem. Your inner world is not a private affair. The darkness you refuse to confront within yourself does not stay there. It leaks out, poisoning your relationships, distorting your perceptions, and turning your world into a mirror of your own disowned self. And its consequences are far more devastating than you could ever imagine. The leak of your own darkness does not stop at the edges of your personal relationships. It seeps into the very foundations of the world you inhabit, becoming a silent, invisible architect of your reality. What begins as a private war within a single soul, when multiplied by millions, becomes the public carnage of human history. The projection of the shadow is the engine of tribalism, the fuel of ideology, and the justification for nearly every atrocity ever committed. Look at the fractured state of our world, the screaming abyss between political parties, the vitriol of online discourse, the unbridgeable chasms between cultures and nations. We believe we are fighting over policies, over ethics, over truth. But more often than not, we are simply fighting our own unacknowledged reflection. We load up the catapult of our consciousness with all our own greed, hypocrisy, and foolishness, and we launch it across the aisle, decorating our opponents in the very sins we refuse to taste on our own tongues. We see them not as human beings with different perspectives, but as monstrous caricatures, as the living embodiment of everything we fear and hate within ourselves. This is the ultimate victory for the shadow, to keep us so busy pointing fingers at the world that we never, ever turn that finger back toward ourselves. This is not just a philosophical abstraction. It's a trap built from the very wiring of your brain. Your mind is a masterful storyteller, but it prioritizes consistency over truth. When you project a negative trait onto someone, an army of cognitive biases rushes to defend that narrative. Confirmation bias acts as your loyal, sycophantic servant, filtering reality to present you only with the evidence that proves you right. You see? He is arrogant. Did you hear what she said? She is manipulative. Your brain ignores all contradictory evidence, all nuance, all humanity, in favor of a clean, simple story where you are the good guy and they are the villain. This process is then supercharged by the most primitive part of your brain, the amygdala, your ancient threat detector. When you encounter your own projected darkness in another person, it doesn't feel like a psychological disagreement. It feels like a mortal threat. Your heart rate quickens, your muscles tense, you are physiologically preparing for battle. This is why political arguments can feel so visceral, so personal, so existentially terrifying. You are not debating tax policy. You are standing at the mouth of a cave, staring down the predator you believe will devour you, never realizing that the predator's face is your own. The consequences ripple outward, creating a cultural neurosis. We live in a world that demands a performance of flawless positivity. Our digital lives are curated galleries of success, happiness, and moral certainty. We airbrush our photos, our opinions, and our very identities. Yet, in the shadows of this gleaming facade, we gorge ourselves on a diet of outrage, scandal, and the gleeful dissection of public failures. We create a schizophrenic reality where we must pretend to be saints while obsessively consuming the sins of others. This is the shadow's playground. It allows us to feel clean while playing in the mud. But the cost of this game is your soul's vitality. A life spent in denial of your own complexity is a life half-lived. The energy you expend holding down your darkness, policing your thoughts, and projecting your fears is energy that could be used for creation, for passion, for connection, for courage. The shadow, you see, doesn't just hold your demons. It holds your fire. Perhaps the most tragic consequence, however, is the inverse of this process, the projection of your light. Jung called this the golden shadow. Just as you cast your unwanted darkness onto your enemies, you cast your undeveloped brilliance onto your idols. You look at an artist, a leader, or an entrepreneur, and you are awestruck by their creativity, their confidence, their freedom. You put them on a pedestal, believing them to be a different species of human, possessing qualities you could never dream of. But what if that admiration is simply the recognition of your own unclaimed potential? That creativity you adore in the painter is your own dormant artistry. That courage you envy in the activist is your own sleeping lion. That freedom you worship in the traveler is your own soul's deepest yearning. By projecting your gold onto others, you absolve yourself of the terrifying responsibility of shining your own light. You are left feeling small, inadequate, and perpetually in awe of a greatness that you fail to recognize is your own birthright. You are trapped in a prison of your own making, its walls built from the darkness you deny, and its ceiling built from the light you give away. You are the protagonist of a story, living as a background character. The key to the cell exists, but it is not what you think. It is not forged from positive thinking, nor is it hidden in a doctrine of moral purity. It will not be handed to you by a guru or a savior. The key has been in your pocket all along, cold against your skin, and its inscription reads, "Turn around." The path to liberation is not forward, not upward, not away from the darkness. It is a descent. The only way out of the prison is to walk willingly into its deepest, most terrifying chamber, light a candle, and sit down with the prisoner. The radical act required to break free is not one of conquest, but one of courageous communion. You must stop fighting the stranger in the mirror and begin a conversation. This is the great work, the opus magnus of the alchemists, the night sea journey of the hero, the integration of the shadow. It is the most terrifying and most necessary task of a human life. It begins with an act of brutal, unflinching self-honesty. You must become a detective in the crime scene of your own soul. Your first clues are your own emotional triggers, your moments of disproportionate rage, your biting judgments, your searing envy. This is where the real work begins, a process Jung called active imagination. You must give the shadow a voice. In the quiet theater of your mind, or in the private pages of a journal, you invite it onto the stage. You ask it questions. Why do you bring me these self-sabotaging urges? What do you fear will happen if I succeed? What pain are you holding that I have refused to feel? At first, the silence may be deafening, or the voice that answers may be a venomous hiss of everything you hate. But if you persist, if you listen with genuine curiosity rather than condemnation, something miraculous happens. The monster begins to reveal its wounds. The demon begins to tell its story. The great German poet Goethe captured this perfectly in his epic, Faust. Dr. Faust does not defeat Mephistopheles, the devilish embodiment of his shadow. He makes a pact with him. He walks with him through depravity and wonder, and in doing so, he becomes complete. He learns that the spirit that always wills the evil can often work the good. This is the great secret. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is your unwilling partner, your spurned collaborator, holding a treasure you desperately need. This journey is the oldest story in the world, encoded in our most sacred myths. It is Inanna, Queen of Heaven, descending into the underworld, stripped of her power and her jewels at each of the 7 gates, dying and being reborn. It is the hero being swallowed by the whale, surviving in the belly of the beast, and emerging with a wisdom that was inaccessible in the world of light. These are not just tales. They are psychological blueprints. They teach us that wholeness is only found by confronting the parts of ourselves we have sentenced to death. When you begin this process of integration, the energy you once used to repress your own nature is liberated. This is the source of all true creativity, of authentic power. You no longer need to project your gold onto others because you are mining it from your own depths. You develop a profound compassion, not from a place of naive idealism, but from the humbling recognition of your own capacity for darkness. You see the struggle in others because you have honored it in yourself. You have taken the key, you have turned the lock, and the cell door is creaking open. You are no longer a prisoner. But standing in the doorway, you sense there is one more thing to understand, a final realization that will not just change you, but redefine the very reality you perceive. You are standing in the doorway, the scent of the damp, dark cell behind you, the world of light before you. You have faced the prisoner, your shadow, and by acknowledging it, you have integrated its power. The energy that fueled your self-sabotage and your projections now flows through you as vitality and authenticity. You feel more solid, more real, more whole than you have ever felt. A sense of quiet power hums within you. And yet, you sense this is not the end of the story. This newfound wholeness feels like the beginning of a question, not the final answer. You have reconciled the 2 warring halves of yourself. But what does that reconciliation mean? What is the ultimate truth that this painful, beautiful union was meant to reveal? The final realization is not that you have learned to balance the light and the dark. It is not that you have become a better or more complete person. The final, most powerful, and reality-shattering realization is that there was never any division to begin with. The war was an illusion. The separation was a dream. This is the destination that Carl Jung's map was always pointing toward. The realization of the true self, not the small, curated self of the ego, but the capital S self, the unifying center of the total personality, which embraces both the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the dark. It is the still point at the center of the turning world. The goal of this entire journey was not to make the ego stronger. It was to make it humble, to have it step aside and surrender its claim to the throne, recognizing itself as a mere servant to this vast, mysterious, and whole reality. This is a truth that echoes through the deepest spiritual traditions of humanity. It is the Taoist yin-yang, a symbol not of opposition, but of perfect, flowing interdependence, where the light contains the seed of the dark, and the dark contains the seed of the light. It is the profound declaration of the mystics that all is one. From this new vantage point, your entire life is recontextualized. Every moment of painful inner conflict, every act of self-sabotage, every venomous projection was not a moral failing. It was the fragmented parts of your consciousness crying out for reunion. The pain was not a punishment. It was a compass needle, shivering and spinning wildly, trying to point you back home to the truth of your own wholeness. The stranger in the mirror was not a monster. It was the boundless self, wearing a terrifying mask, because it was the only way to get your attention. The war had to be so terrible, the prison so lonely, for you to finally be willing to abandon the fight and seek a deeper truth. The world no longer appears as a battlefield of us versus them. It reveals itself as a grand, intricate dance of a single consciousness expressing itself in infinite forms. You feel an unshakable peace, a sense of belonging that is not dependent on anyone's approval, because you belong to everything. The desperate need to be right evaporates, replaced by a deep and quiet understanding. This is the ultimate freedom, not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom from the need to be anything other than what you, in your totality, already are. So we invite you to begin this journey inward. Here, we don't just explore forgotten histories or abandoned places, we explore the abandoned parts of ourselves. Much like River Country or Discovery Island, once vibrant with life, now overgrown, silent, and surrendered to the wildness of nature. Your own psyche has places you have cordoned off and forgotten. Places that were once essential to you, now deemed too messy or too dangerous. Our purpose is to hand you the map and the courage to venture back into those overgrown landscapes. Because it is there, in the unsettling quiet, among the beautiful decay of who you thought you were, that you will find the untamed, powerful, and whole reality of who you truly are. The journey begins now. Look in the mirror. Hold your gaze. And this time, when the stranger appears, do not look away.